All right, Bus Bench Babes. Today we have Elly Cummings. She is a senior vice president of New American Funding. And this woman has weathered every up and down, every backwards, forwards thing you can imagine in the mortgage business and weathers it with grace and style. And she's one hella badass. So I'm so excited for you guys to meet her. Let's dive in.
You're listening to the Girl Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast, where we invite you to check your ego at the app, grab a cup of coffee, and get ready to dive into all things real estate marketing, social media, friendship, hardship, love, money mindset, and all the things that celebrate you as a badass boss babe.
We're here to encourage you, show up for you, give you a loving kick in the pants when you need it most, and be your soft place to land on the hardest of days. So pull up a seat at our table and get ready to be inspired and start living your best life by design.
Welcome to the Girl Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast. We are so excited you're here.
Okay, girls, let's dive in. Hi, Elly. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. As I'm obsessing over a tangled bracelet, but I'm going to stop on that.
Well, so when I was thinking about, Christy and I always have brainstorm sessions. We're like, who do we want to interview on the podcast? And you came to mind because you have been at this for so long. I met you through a family friend, and I'm thinking 2002, so at least 20 years ago. Yep. And you were in your 20s back then, I think. I was in my early 30s, but you were for sure in your 20s. And tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do for fun when you're not working and being a badass boss babe? And
it's fun is work. No, I do love what I do, so it doesn't feel like work. But for fun, it's travel for me. I think I figured that out a long
that's
time
what you
ago.
and I have in common for sure. I'm always FOMOing over your trips.
I figured that out a long time ago that I'm there's so much world to see, and I'm going to do my best to see as much of it as possible. So if I am not talking about mortgages or working mortgages, I am probably planning a trip or on a trip.
Or remodeling a house or something.
Exactly. I'm just crazy enough to always want to be remodeling houses.
Yeah, Elly has really beautiful style. And so that's always fun to compare notes about that kind of stuff too.
Well, and likewise, your house, love your taste, love your style.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So did you always know that you wanted this to be your career path?
Absolutely not.
What'd you go to school for?
I went to school.
Did you go to St. Thomas?
No, I showed up there late because the girls were at St. Thomas and I had just finished at UMD.
Okay.
I did that fast track, did PSEO in high school so that
I did too.
I could knock out a couple years of college. Yeah. And I went to UMD and I started pre-law, and then I decided that really wasn't what I wanted to do. And then for about 5 minutes, I thought fashion merchandising sounded fun. And then
I could see you doing that too.
Yep. But it was Dayton's was getting bought by Marshall Fields, and it
it all went downhill after Dayton's
for me.
left.
I was that's not going to work. And then I thought finance, and so I finished with finance as a degree, knowing nothing about mortgage and having that wasn't my plan. Mm-hmm. And it was 2 months out of college. I had probably most people, I had a job right out of college it was a job. All of a sudden I was oh my God, I'm an adult. I need to do something. And it was terrible. It was selling magazine inserts for a magazine that nobody wanted to buy anyway. So who wanted to buy advertising in it? And it was by accident. I had someone in my family was in mortgage. It was my stepsister. She moved from California to here. And she was we need help. We need a receptionist. We need an office manager. And I'm well, I would do just about anything to get
to not be selling
these inserts.
Magazine subscriptions.
Yep. Yes. And that was back in 1998. So
wow.
Fast forward to now, and I've been doing it ever since.
Oh my gosh. So you weathered the infamous crash 07-08.
Oh, yes.
How did that go? What did that look like? How are you still here? I know that ran me out of the business and I had to take a hiatus. It was awful.
It was horrible. I just think I remember the implodometer of every day you're looking at companies that are going out of business.
What kind of role did you have around then?
So I was a senior VP running operations in like wholesale third-party origination for a company in Minneapolis at the time, like a regional company. And it was like twofold. So our demise there was not really, it wasn't driven by the industry. It was driven by an unscrupulous player who spent some time in prison.
Oh, wow.
After. So
there's a lot of that back in the day.
Yeah. So we had to do a real quick shutdown, figure life out. And we got all of our employees and everybody shifted to one company. I didn't want to go. And I had a few months where I was like, what am I going to do?
Yeah, you could get out and do something different.
Yes, and I interviewed in some other positions, and one of them was, I know you had gotten into the home health care. One of them, a friend of mine who was an attorney that we did a lot of work with, he was on a board of a home health care agency, and they needed someone in like finance and whatever, and I thought about it, and I went there, and that was another one of those things where I was really glad it didn't work out because they had some not so good things happen with some potential fraud after. And I was like, so dodged a bullet. But it was like, I couldn't come up with what else. And I really was passionate about the industry. And so most people thought I was absolutely bonkers, but I started a mortgage company with the backing of a financial services group in 2009. So like everybody was running.
I didn't know that.
Running away. And I was like.
And you like ran into the fire.
Yep. And it was a big fire.
Wow.
Yeah. It was.
That kind of blows my mind. That is super crazy that you were like head first into the fire. So like what did that even look like? How did you get, like people were laying off people left and right. So were you just like, hey, like I know that you're good at what you do and like I would love to have you on board, and people are like, well, how am I going to make a living? Is that what do those conversations look like when you're trying to start up a company?
That was a fairly accurate summation of it. And it was also at the time, so coming out of the, like the biggest crash ever in the industry was just battered. And there was a lot of bad things that happened in the industry. So there was a whole new host of regulation that was coming into play and licensing requirements. So there was, we'll call it challenging, a little bit of getting up and going from that perspective. So there was a time frame that was a little longer than planned of just getting things going to even operate to do
like
business.
The logistics part of it. Like everyone needs to be licensed.
Yeah. And it was
crash course everybody.
6 months of all of that and trying to figure that out and in getting set up with investors. And it was really interesting because it's a time where investors are scared to do business with anybody and being a brand new company and how do we know you're going to be there tomorrow and why should we do business with you? So it was a lot of challenges that we worked through. It was just me I was employee 0 and for like 6 months of just getting everything set up. And then I started hiring salespeople, and it was some of them, I didn't go back to the people that I knew. It was like almost like a fresh start of starting with people. But there was also a lot of displaced people because of what had happened, and salespeople too, and people that were
so many people got out of the business altogether.
Yes.
So were you targeting people like, oh, I know this person was awesome at this place, or was it?
There was a little of that, and some too of, I think that this person could be great in a different role if we could get them talked back into coming into this. And over the handful of years that I was doing that, we went from just me to about 60 employees.
That's awesome.
Doing business, and we did business in 20 states. We worked a lot with financial advisors and financial planners doing mortgage reviews and mortgage plans. And it was kind of our, not that it was, we were doing something secret that people weren't, but our approach to it was very different and how we did it. So it was really what like got our foot back.
Well, any
in the
good
door.
mortgage advisor needs to have a great counterpart in all different fields,
Sure.
like a good accountant and mortgage professionals. So, I mean, that's providing well-rounded service. So it's awesome that you had those relationships
And it was
in a time when people were still freaking out.
for sure, because the real estate market, I mean, what's so different today, the real estate market had, just crashed and burned.
Right.
Like, and it was people are sitting on houses that are worth 30% of what they potentially paid for it. So focusing on growing around not just the traditional way with real estate agents, but going with financial advisors was what was needed at the time to get us going. And that was like we'll call it phase one of that company before we took more of that traditional approach as well as the market started to recover, because then it was far more refinancing than purchasing, because you had when the stimulus started of all of that and rates dropped for the first time to the historic lows, then there was a ton of opportunity in the refi market.
So smart. Well, like, you're a total hustler. How do you define balance, and like, how do you achieve that, like, in your personal life?
I would say, and to me, balance is so different for so many people. It is, I think you have to, whatever your balance is, needs to be the focus on something you truly love. So sometimes I kind of go pinch me, because I do still love this industry and love what I do, so that it doesn't feel imbalanced when there's a lot of work, because it's become such a part of who I am. But there's also, you can't go that hard and run that fast and just be business all the time. And
Well, yeah, the last 2 years, if they taught us anything, they're like, oh my God, I need to push pause. Like,
yes,
it's been crazy.
yes. And doing that, and I do, like, I'm far more intentional. And I think that came out of the last couple of years too, because it was so easy to just be 100% into business. And there were times where you're like, well, there's not really a whole lot else to do. But
I'm just working from home. I'll just keep working
all day, all night. Yep. Maybe I'll just change clothes or move from one room to the next, so it feels a little less like I'm working. But yeah, but getting out of there. Like, when I say out of that headspace is key. And I do, a lot of it for me is reading, and is, like, cheesy as it sounds. I have become a morning person, like a early morning person.
Me too. I love the quiet of the mornings.
And
it's magical.
I plan my day, and I think about work, but I also, sometimes I'm usually always reading some meditation of sorts, whatever it is, like getting my thoughts together. Like, I plan, even when I'm traveling for work, I plan an entire hour before I even start getting ready of just like my
It's called like a morning routine. They've written books about it. Yeah. Like that miracle morning. Just like sit and be and
feel like
create
I'm
your intentions for the day.
Making my own. And I saw you posted something about that recently. And I'm like, I've like kind of unintentionally, but now intentionally created that.
That's so awesome.
Routine. But that helps, like, I think that helps set the tone for my day. And when it's like going back to balance, when you're starting your day intentional with something like a goal in mind, what you want to get accomplished, what you want to do. And some of that is even outside, like a lot of it is outside of work. Of after that, then I want to do this. And I'm going to read that or do that and that.
When you're reading, do you read like business books or self-help or fun, like fiction? Like
all of the above.
That's awesome.
And in the morning, I'm usually reading business books or some type of self-help type. And they all kind of tie to things. Like, I've been reading more about habits recently. I find that really fascinating.
I have Atomic Habits over there.
Trying to figure out, ways to pull those back in. When I'm reading like the fun stuff that could be so random and whatever, that's usually not in my morning, because that's like what I want to read on the beach or yep. Yeah. I have my whole other stack of books for a Saturday afternoon with no plans or sitting on the beach on vacation.
I love that. I really think your life is truly inspiring. And like I love that you're like, I just bought a house in Florida and now I'm remodeling it and I'm just going to go be a badass and live in Florida. Or I'm just going to go to Italy and go drink wine all over.
Yep.
you've always been someone that I've really admired in the business. And like, I just love that you walk the walk, you talk the talk, but you never seem like you're really like phased or stressed out by the business.
And I'm probably not. And I don't know where that came. And I don't know and I shouldn't say I don't know, because it was probably, I think I was a lot more phased by it pre-crash.
Yeah.
But going through all of that, you learn how little you can control. So how,
Yeah.
you could have been doing every single thing right, and none of us thought that the industry would implode as quick as it did. And it didn't matter. It was like, how I react to this matters far more than I think it does. But it is, I don't get real flustered by this anymore. I mean, I'm always thinking about it, and it's like it's a priority, and I've got a sense of urgency, but you'll never see me like screaming or having some type of
I've never seen you lose your cool.
No, and but I don't think that's in my nature. Like, I have had dreams where I was trying to like yell and I physically couldn't, because that's like probably how little, like, I don't know if I've ever actually yelled. Like, I hate having to like raise my voice to get someone's attention.
Yeah.
So
people probably really appreciate that about working with you.
Yeah. I'm certainly not perfect, and there's always things to be working on, but I think anyone around me would say being a hothead is not one of the things I need to.
I feel like that's a superpower in your role. I love that. Well, let's shift gears and talk about the actual mortgage business. Like, how is your company pivoting during, like, we're in a shifting market. That's what's happening. Everybody knows it. Like, how are you guys preparing for it, and how are you changing and taking action?
So I would say a lot of different ways, but one of the main things, and this is not so much a pivot, is getting back to the basics, because with so
We've been
much
saying that too, and I don't know why people are still chasing shiny pennies. It is basics.
It is. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. I mean, there's tools today that we need to use that we didn't. Like, we didn't talk about 3-2-1 buy downs or 2-1 buy downs a year or two ago. No, you didn't need to buy down your interest rate on a temporary basis or permanent basis if your interest rates are
3%.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a buy down. What?
Yeah.
And, we didn't talk about assumptions back then, and ways or recasting, and how to sell non-contingent and do different things, because everything just happened so fast. So we do focus on some different product right now and ways to make things work, because things are different when rates have effectively doubled inside of a year. It affects how much people qualify for and what they need to be looking at, or their whole journey into that. But a lot of that is training on patience for people, and especially for salespeople and loan officers, because before, you would meet with a client and that client is like, okay, I can qualify for more than I ever thought I could because rates are so low.
Yeah.
Let's go shopping tomorrow and let's buy a house and let's close in 21 days. And now that client, the same profile of client, comes in and goes, well, I thought I could qualify for more.
And they're hemming and hawing and
and
deliberating
now I don't know.
over it.
And
we're seeing that on the real
and
estate
it's now the
side
right
too.
time. And so it's a different journey in a different way. And so we train more on like patience and how is the best way to follow up and different ways to present things, because when people are on the fence, you need to present in more ways and give them options.
And they don't want to be like oversold, because that doesn't feel good either. If they're like, ooh, this is already freaking me out.
Yeah, they're not like push, push, push.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that we do, but we spend so much time on just that back to the basics of, and I know you I know you deal with this because you invest in yourself and you invest in a coach and you're always working on your business. And so much of that is the basics of, if I get up every day and I do this activity, I will get these results. Now the numbers might change. I might have to call 15 more people than I did this week, or 100, because your funnel a year ago could be a lot smaller because they were coming through it so fast. And now it's like you have to have so much more going just based on the rate of things coming through.
Right.
But I mean, top producers are still top producers in down markets. And there's still people in this market that are doing better than they were a year ago.
Right.
And so much of that comes from, if you like listen to them, it isn't because they made up some fancy non-existent loan program that really doesn't exist. It is because they are just doubling down and getting back to the basics.
On the stuff that works. They know works.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like every time I turn around, like we were at Summit in August for Tom Ferry coaching, and that's what they're like, back to the basics. Like,
yep.
the market's always going to be up. It's going to be down. It's going to be whatever it's going to do. And like, what can you do to just not be affected by the highs and lows?
Right. And and I think what happens with so many people, and we see it with our own people, is like that start stop of people, like humans by nature. I think when we get discouraged, the first response is to just take a break. And that's like the worst
I'm exhibit
thing.
A. Yeah, I do that all the time. And I'm like, come on, no. Can't
Yeah,
do
but
this.
it's like,
the
I gotta
worst thing
keep
to
going.
do.
And
Yeah.
it's like, because if you stop, and sometimes like, and this is like totally different from the context of taking a break to like take a vacation, like taking a planned break.
Yeah.
But it's if I am talking about prospecting and I go really hard for a month, and then I get frustrated because the day 30, I had a bad day. And so then I just stopped. Days 1 through 29 were a waste because I stopped. You know, it's like, you got to keep going. And that's part of those basics of just.
It's the hardest thing to do when you're like,
right. I just want to curl up and.
Yeah. Or you're like, why are my efforts not paying off like maybe they did in a different market?
Yep. But then don't you agree? Then all of a sudden they do.
Yeah.
And it's and it might be slightly different, but it's always seems to be when you're on the brink of almost panic of, is this really going to come together? That all of a sudden it does. Yeah. All of a sudden you have a handful of accepted offers and things come together and you're like, this did not 2 days ago.
The 2 days ago this was not looking like, this was not looking good.
Right. You're like, do I really want to be in real estate or mortgage?
Yeah. I feel like the universe a lot of times will reward me. Like I'll start lead generating, or I'll be on like a super steady, awesome track of it. And then some random past client out of the blue will call and say, hey, I want to. So it's almost like I'm not getting results from what I'm actually doing. But like the universe is like, all right, I'm going to do you a solid. You're doing the work. And someone that you wasn't even on your radar now wants to buy
Here's a carrot. And now this is. But then
you're like, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, it re-energizes you because you're like, okay, I got to win. And even though it wasn't out of this column, a win is a win at that point.
I totally agree with that. Well, let's talk about what your predictions are. Like, what do you think is going to happen, like in the real estate and mortgage space here in the next couple of years, even like in the next 6 months or 2023?
So I do not have the doom and gloom outlook, and I'm sure.
Which I'm so excited to hear that. I was listening to a podcast this weekend, and I'm like, I'm shutting this off because I'm literally going to jump into news. It was so bad.
No.
It was so bad.
We don't have time for that.
No.
And I think there's so many people, and that comes from so many people are operating from a place of fear right now.
Scarcity mode, yeah.
And then they go to like, it's going to be 2009 all over again. And I'm like, it is nowhere. I mean, there's not a single indicator right now that tells us it's going to be 2009 all over again or anywhere near that. And we spend like, I'm sure like you, I have my handful of like trusted resources of economists and places that I'm looking at and paying attention to.
You have way more than I do,
time.
I'm sure.
And it's I kind of geek out over the data and spend time every morning looking at it and where things are going and who says what. But I see, and especially in like Minnesota, where we're somewhat insular to like what happens on the coast, we don't have the swings. You see revised forecasts now of going into 2023 of maybe some downward revisions to some markets contracting, of actually maybe having a shade of a loss in values. And when I say a shade, I'm talking like a percent.
Which is nothing.
Nothing.
Considering
and
people have seen double
30,
digits.
40, 50% depreciation. And most of it is when you look where I do business, it's not. There are markets that still are probably going to be in that 8 to 10% range. There's some that might slow down to like 2 to 3%, we'll call it. But that to me is not a down market. I mean, we're coming off a couple of really good years.
Right.
But we know nothing lasts forever, just like a bust cycle doesn't last forever, neither does a boom cycle. And I think that 2023 I think we've kind of hit the worst of it. And especially when it comes to interest rates, it really feels like what's happened in the last month is really tested a ceiling. And I don't think that interest rates are going to go up to 9%. I don't think interest rates are going to go to 8%. Yes, we've dabbled into all of a sudden, oh my gosh, 7%.
Right.
But then I also look at that and go, I spent the first half of my career with rates averaging 7%.
So that's what I did back in my mortgage and real estate days, in the 2000s, like in the early,
And nobody cared because nobody knew any different.
Right.
And then we had the crash, and then you get the Fed involved, and they started stimulating the economy, and they started manipulating the interest rates. And as a society, we got really used to that for the last 13 years, and not just in mortgages. You felt it in if you financed a car, if you even people that had credit cards, whatever you could. Everything was so much lower, and it was it wasn't how the world ever worked before 2008, 2009. So we go through this phase of where we just got so used to it that we even thought when we would get close to 5% that rates were high, that it's like, when you think about it, for 30 years, having a rate of 6 or 7% is really not that high if you want to think of it just from that perspective.
Yeah.
It is. If you look at even what the stock market does over 30 years, in a conservative estimate, you'd make at least 10% on your money. So if I am just an investor and someone wants me to borrow, like put my money into something for 30 years, and I go, well, conservatively, I can get a return of 10% in the stock market as a private investor, why would I want to lend my money to someone for 2, 3, 4, 5, even 6%?
Yeah.
So it goes back to just what we became accustomed to. And believe me, I'm not a proponent of rates staying up there. My life would be so much easier if rates were 3%.
Yeah, me too.
But it's
not realistic.
It's not the end of the world. And it's also, it's not realistic.
Yeah.
And at some point, it'll be good for all of us to have an economy that's less propped up by the Fed and that has some more private investors in it, even on the mortgage side, that offer product in there. And that does mean that rates on that product would be higher. But that's a totally different angle on that. But I think that we're back to the original comment. I think we're kind of at a ceiling. It feels like it. We've tried to, what most people don't see behind the scenes is like how volatile these rates are and how much our days are up and down watching this.
I've heard swings. It's like multiple rate sheets a day type thing.
And it can
I remember that from my mortgage days.
Basis point swings. Yeah. And you're just like, oh my God, I can't even, and sometimes it's even hard to even like find a mark because it's moving so fast. But with that, I mean, the market really tried to push a high, and it kept coming back down. And there's also a point where, the market itself kind of cries uncle, and there's going to be, and the Fed will step in again. And it's a matter of, unfortunately, it becomes a matter of that frowned upon R word of we need them to formally come out and say the word and say there's a recession. And then you see them
Where
start
are they
to
not?
ease. There's the odd thing right now is unemployment is still low. And there's still a pretty robust jobs market. Now, the numbers are a little misleading because how they count that. Like when you get a jobs report right now and the number comes in slightly higher, what it doesn't tell you is some of those jobs that have been added are people taking on second and third jobs to support their families right now because the cost of goods has gone up so much. So there's a little bit of a misleading factor in thinking that there's so many more new jobs that are created, because there's also a lot of them still being lost. If you see like FedEx revising forecasts and Amazon revising forecasts, and they're laying off people, and it's
a lot of layoffs too. Yeah, it's
big numbers, and in sectors all over, not real estate or mortgage. But they really want a period of time where they think that it's affected. Now we've had 2 consecutive quarters, which meets the official definition of recession. But until the Economic Council on Recessions, I mean, it's not the right name, but it's close to it, calls it. It's not one. And and they're definitely not going to say it before an election. We have midterms coming up in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
It's the belief right now is it'll be the end of Q1 when it's formally called, and then you'll start to see the Fed step off. So the market has already priced in the Fed doing 2 more pretty significant rate hikes and getting that FOMC rate to almost 5% by the end of the third quarter, which most every economist and World Bank leader thinks is too high. So that'll have everybody screaming for the relief valves to come on.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting how many people don't, like even real estate agents, where they think like when the Fed changes the rate that automatically means that the rate's going to change. It's like so much of that is factored in way ahead of time. They've already accounted for a lot of that.
Yep.
But it's interesting, especially like what I'm seeing is a lot of like newer people in the business they don't get that's not like a 1-for-1 just because your rates didn't go up 3/4 of a point.
Oh, they announced it today, so this is going to affect me today. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, so that's where part of it too, why I think we have kind of capped, and there's obviously my disclaimer would be if there's more unrest in the global markets, things could certainly change, but all signs point to the next changes we see being downward as far as rates go. Yes.
Yeah, which is awesome. So it's awesome. I've heard from a couple of very respected sources in the last couple weeks the same thing. And I'm like, then I don't know why all the people, these other people that are like still spewing like the doom and gloom are still doing that. You're like, it feels like there's good things on the horizon.
There's far more good on the horizon than bad. And I look at it too, if it doesn't matter what topic we pick, if we want to find something bad, we can have a whole conversation about what's wrong with it.
Right.
Or if we want to look at what's right and what's working, we can have an even better conversation because it's actually entertaining and fun and talk about all the things that are working and are right with it.
Yeah. The crazy thing is, I was thinking about, like, especially now that you're saying this, but I heard it a couple times last week where they're like, we're going to probably see some relief in like Q1, that's going to potentially make for another really hot spring market. If everyone that's sitting on the fence, dilly-dallying, like waiting for the sky to fall and rates go down, I think the market's going to go nuts, and we still don't have enough inventory.
Right. And the inventory is I think, the bigger problem, still not doom and gloom, but that's our bigger problem over just slower home sales. And we market this and we don't market it as a ploy. I truly believe it that now is still a phenomenal time to buy, because waiting for rates to potentially drop, you're just going to pay more. And your rate isn't permanent. People don't keep their same mortgage.
I know. That's what we keep saying. Like, you get into a house you can actually afford at whatever interest rates today, and then you can always change it.
Yep.
Do a low cost refi. Like, there's all these options. You're working with an awesome loan officer. They're going to call you. Hey, I can save you $500. Let's get you refinanced.
As soon as it makes sense, they're going to be reaching out. And it's not, it's cliche and it kind of became a joke this year, but it's the truth of it's that you marry the house, you date the rate.
We have been saying that, but I was listening to a Facebook Live, the one I had to pause yesterday, that he's like, that phrase is just BS. And I'm like, it's not. Like, if home prices continue to go up, can you afford the house that you want next year?
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
And you might not be able to at any rate. And then when we get back into right now, there's a little bit of softening in everything. If we're seeing some more inventory come into the market. Yeah. And people, like sellers, are more willing to work with buyers. You can
get an inspection.
Yes. And you don't have to advise someone to not get the inspection, and to...
I hate doing that. I hate having to do that. I'm like, I want everyone to be able to have a home inspection.
Right. Or to you need a cash offer, or you need this and all these other things that...
Well, and FHA and VA buyers actually get a dog in the race right now. It's awesome.
And these are all good things that when we go back to rates dropping, and it's not going to be rates dropping to 3. It's going to be rates dropping into the 5s. Right. And the difference between, if we're just saying 6.5 and 5.5, it's not that much. And it's nominal. I made up a word, nominal, when you think of okay, am I going to pay 8% more for the house?
Yeah.
Am I going to be back into multiples where I'm going to have to pay over it because I'm
You're
going
paying
to wait?
$50,000 more because you're in a bidding war. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm totally of the same school of thought. I'm like, I think people should buy houses now when they can still afford them. And then if rates decide to drop, then refinance next year.
Right. And I also think that if someone is making a decision to purchase a home based on rate alone, they are really in the wrong frame of mind, because you should buy a home because you want to invest in wealth. You want to invest in shelter. You want to create something for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Your driver for buying a house shouldn't be an interest rate. It should be, can I afford it? Can I afford the payment? Do I have the money needed to get into this on the loan type that I am comfortable with? But it shouldn't be, I'm only going to buy a house if I think rates are going to be X, Y, or Z.
Totally. That's why you're on this podcast. Birds of a feather. Yeah, I'm just really over the doom and gloom. And it's nice to hear someone that literally the senior vice president of one of the biggest shops in town, like giving us like the real deal that it's not doom and gloom. The sky is not falling. Yeah.
No, it absolutely is not. And I look at these markets, even like in 2009, starting a company. The reason I did it is there's more opportunity than there's not. And when you've got a big chunk of people operating out of fear, they're like, they can't see the forest through the trees. So they are missing out on all the opportunity right in front of them today to do something effective with this.
I love that. Okay, so talk to the woman that's listening to this podcast. It's like, wow, she is a total badass. And like, you really dominate total male-driven industry. Like, what would you tell like that woman listening? Like, if she wants to pursue like a VP level and really like go hard on any career, like what would you tell that woman?
I would say you have to take it, not in a stealing sort of way, and it doesn't need to be forceful, but nobody is ever going to come tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, Elly, I think you did a really good job. Would you like to run my company? And especially the time when I got in the industry and where I was, there's been so much that's happened that's paved the way for more opportunity, but it's been because of the work of other leaders too, and other females of we need to help create mentorship, create opportunity, talk about our stories to others, because there wasn't. But I think of getting into this industry, and it could be the same in any industry. I was young. I mean, we're all young when we started something, and female, and it was all middle-aged men, and it didn't matter that I was
You're
smarter.
like, I'm working with my dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you could sit around and look at a lot of people and think, I could do that better. And I have shown that I can do that better. And I think I have a better idea, or I know if they would listen to me, this would happen. But they don't, and they don't take you seriously at first, because what do you know? You're a young girl. And there's, it's kind of placating, because I was treated like you say, like I'm in a room with my dad. Well, a lot of them looked at it like I'm in a room with my daughter, and you get treated almost that way. And even in roles, I can go back to something where I was in the same role with somebody and we were paid differently. And the only reason was he was 10 years older than me. That was really the only thing you could come in. Like, I did more of the work and whatnot, but that's what it was. But the coming back to like bring it full circle though, when I say take it, you can't be passive, and you don't have to be aggressive I think sometimes people think aggressive is I'm loud, everybody knows when I come in a room, I'm just taking everything over.
Yeah, because that's so not you.
That's not the aggressive that I talk about.
Yeah.
But you have to be like aggressive with yourself and knowing what you want, and you have to decide what that is, and you have to take it. Like, you have to act as if. If I want to be the vice president or the senior vice president or the president of this company, I have to, from today forward, act as if I already am that person.
I love that.
And remember too, that you can't get discouraged when someone didn't ask you to be it, because nobody, until the last, we'll call it 7 or 8 years recently, maybe 9, like I was given opportunity and like asked to join something, but then you have to prove yourself and grow from there. And then you get to a point where I shouldn't say I was never asked, because you are sought after to do a role that you've already established yourself in doing. But until I got to that point of proving myself, there was not a single person that came up to me and said, I would like to promote you to this. I would like to. It was, you have to ask for it. And you can't get discouraged when it's not recognized that maybe you deserve it, because until you say it and act as if and ask for it, it probably won't happen. And I think as females, that's where a lot of us go sideways or maybe get stunted, is it's hard to ask for it. And I didn't for a long time. And then I would end up taking more and taking on more that other people should have done. And I still wasn't moving to the next level.
I think a lot of times it's like an emotional thing, because you don't want to hear no. And then you're like, oh my God, that's going to be crushing, or I might cry or whatever.
Yep.
But like the answer is always no until you ask.
Correct. And you will hear no a few times, and you'll hear not yet or whatever, but, or no, but, or however that goes. But even with sales or with anything, if we play it safe and we don't do anything because we're going to be told no, we're never going to grow or get out of our box. And it is messy, and it will tell you too, like what can look really great on the outside was never as smooth as it was. The journey to get there was never as smooth as you might think for somebody.
I love that diagram where it's like you think that the line is straight and it's really like this big messy squiggly thing. And it's like, you don't usually see the messy middle. We talk about the messy middle on the podcast a lot, because that's the part that no one wants to look at. They just want to see, here's where she was, here's where she is now. And it was like this really rosy path in between. And it never truly is.
Right. No, that is so spot on, because we always look at, even when we have, we all have people that we put up on a pedestal that we may idolize, or that we see as some type of mentor or somebody we want to model ourselves after. But when we see them and we identify them, we see them after they've already accomplished it. So whether they're 10, 15, 20 years in, we don't see them when they're on the up and up, when they're up and coming, and when they're fighting for trying to figure it out. But it is, you're gonna hear no. But thankfully, I figured out how to take it.
I love that. It's inspiring. I love that you like weathered the storm. Like, I feel like I'm an example of what not to do when the market crashed, and you're a perfect example.
But look at
of
you
what
now,
to do.
though, like coming back into it, of taking, like you had experience and you understood the market, and you went and did a pivot and did something totally different, and then got back into it and created but even like, look at yourself 5 years ago. I bet you wouldn't have told someone that you thought that you would now be the owner of one of the, like, I think the best branded team in the metro.
Yeah.
And,
no, I was terrified. When I got back into the business, like I had to join a team, because I'm like, I don't know if I can do this on my own. And then quickly realized I probably should have left the team sooner.
Yep.
Yeah. But you don't know what you don't know.
And and it's like, you kind of, when you're insulated, it's maybe the rejection feels a little softer if someone tells you, because you haven't really pushed yourself yet either.
Yeah. It was an interesting journey, and there's still days I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing with my life? But I don't think I would change it for anything now.
No. And then I look at it for me, and like, even for you, of like what you've done to get to it. And you can say, okay, well, my journey to creating this team in phase 2 of the real estate career is the last 5 or 6 years, not whatever, but why would you stop now? Like you've gotten to the point where you have created more, and people follow you. People look at you because they're like, she's doing a lot of things right. And even when you're going, should I even be doing it? What do I want to do? You know, it's like there's still, for every doubt you have about yourself, you've got a whole audience behind you thinking, I want to do what she's doing.
Yeah. I mean, and that's hopefully what we're trying to build here with this podcast, that,
Yep.
you know, there was plenty of messy middle that, you know, I always try to talk about, like, I totally keep it real.
Yeah.
Like, you know, but if you have the dream and the desire and surround yourself with incredible people that make you look good and,
For sure,
you know, help brainstorm with, I think it's what
Yeah.
makes it work.
Well, and that's the other thing that's so important too, is surrounding yourself with the right people, because nobody can do it all alone.
Right.
And wherever you want to go, even when you're young and you're starting, you still need to identify who the right people are around you. And usually, like, I never had a mentor, like a true mentor in the industry, which I feel like I've become more passionate now about finding, like, helping people find a mentor, because
they're super important.
it is. And finding somebody that you align with, that can help you and give advice and whatnot, I think is critical as a person starting out. And it's also having a coach and a mentor as an older person, like as where I'm at, I'm like, it's critical too, because we always have to be looking at, none of us are ever, we're never going to keep going if we just always keep doing things the same. We'll never find success. And we've always got to look at, how do, like, markets change, you know, how you feel about things changes, what's important to you changes, and being able to work on that proactively and have some accountability to that is something that I think happens even better with a coach. It's really hard to do it on your own.
I missed my coaching call today for our podcast recording. So I'm rescheduling that this week. But yeah, it's super important. I've had a real estate coach for the last 6.5 years. And like, I was like, when I first got a coach, I'm kicking myself, like, thinking, how different could my life have been had I gotten a coach on board so much sooner?
Sure.
I'm like, you know, I don't like to live in the regret and the what ifs, but that's what people are always like, what would you have done differently? I'm like, hired a coach.
Yep.
That's like, I would have done that before I even knew how to spell realtor or pronounce it, because it would have changed everything in my career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, and I know even, like, I didn't even, as my younger self, didn't even realize it or really know anything about it. And I feel like it's become a lot easier now. And when I say easy, like, easier to find one. Like, there's really good, reputable coaches out there that if you don't know anybody in the industry, that you can hire a very reputable coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't feel like it was 25 years ago for me.
No,
It wasn't.
people weren't talking about it. It's kind of like, same like talking about therapy. Like, you're like, you went to therapy, but you didn't talk about it because
Correct.
it was like, oh, there's something wrong with them. And
Right.
now it's like, people like brag about having a therapist and having
Yep.
coaches, and like, why not? Professional athletes do. Like, why shouldn't we in every area of our life?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that.
I agree.
Well, this was a fun conversation.
Yeah.
How can people find you? Where are you on social?
You can find me on the Instagram.
On the gram?
That would be my preferred. At Elly Cummings is my handle. I couldn't be just Elly, because apparently there's an Elly Cummings out there.
Oh, really?
That got to
How
the
dare
gram ahead
she.
of me. But I've yet to see her on there.
And then, is that your personal or your professional one?
I have them melded, my personal
Okay.
and professional on Instagram. I do have on Facebook. I am both. I have at Elly Cummings is personal, and then there's Elly Cummings New American Funding. Really creative name for my professional one.
I love that. Well, thank you for being here today, and thank you for like setting such an awesome example of what it looks like to like really like go after what you want, not say no, or like, you know, like set a goal and go after it. And really, like, you set the bar really high for mortgage professionals in the Twin Cities, and I think probably nationwide, but I get to deal with you in the Twin Cities, and I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for thinking of me and for having me on. This was fun.
Thank you. Well, until next time, bus bench babes, keep your face off a bus bench and keep being the badass boss babes that you are.
Okay, girls, are you feeling as inspired as we are? We're over here cheering you on because you just finished another episode of the Girl, Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast.
If you want more, head over to girlgetyourfaceoffabusbench.com for show notes and more episodes. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. They mean the world to us, and they're what keep us going.
Girl, thanks for being here.